Okay, I know I'm going on about this tree or whatever, but the thing is even with a little saw like this, again, it has enough power for the size of saw. But you know, like if you plan out how you're going to fall your tree, even something like this can, as long as you know what you're working, like what your saw's limit is. I wasn't at the saw's limit today at all. This thing was just there's a reason why I call him mini beast, right? But when I was falling, I was really using, finesse to get that tree to go because it was so close to my client's house and stuff like that. So why didn't I leave it for somebody else then, if it was, potential? Well, what I was worried about for that tree was that I knew that being a birch, a lot of times when a birch comes down, the top will snap off, branches, it'll rain branches everywhere. So always wear your helmet and stuff like that, because there's a lot of widowmakers on there. But what I was more worried about was that because the stump, I guess a few years back, I probably already had cut the other tree down, which was maybe about that big years ago. So that much of the stump was still left, right? Because it was like kind of like this, but like that birch over there, like I was showing you, is like one small one, one fair size one. Right. But what I was afraid of was that it might have rotted, and I was trying to read the tree, but like it seemed like the base of the tree was pretty good. I even went up, on the ladder to get the rope up as high as I could so I could get my tether line just to more guide it, just put enough tension on it just to guide it to where I wanted it to go. But a tree is like an elephant. When it wants to sit down, once it starts sitting down, you ain't going to stop it, right? So what I was afraid of was that if the base of the tree was rotted, that it might twist off the stump or do something wacky and whatever and go back towards the house. Hence, that's why I put the rope on it. But it didn't do that. It was actually, the stump was actually pretty good where I cut it, and then the second stump was already rotted. But the thing is planning it out. I not only had to figure out where I was going to fall it, but where the top was going to fall in relative to the rest of the tree. So the tree actually fell there, but the top landed there because the top, like I say, it was kind of like doing one of these crazy kind of things like this, right? So if a rotten stump you start cutting, you'd think it's going to go down that way, but it might do something like this and actually, come back on your saw, and now you got a tree that's being held there by a tether line that either is going to go this way, onto a deck or onto, you know what I mean? Like there's just, you didn't want it to do that. So it didn't do that because the stump wasn't bad. And I had assessed that it wasn't too bad, but there was a lot of dead stuff at the top. So I wanted to make sure that like this tree here, although not exactly the same in shape, kind of the same in condition. This tree's actually even worse, but like it's not going to hit the house, I don't think. So we don't care. Ain't broke, don't fix it, right? But you can see the top of that tree came off years ago, and it's still stuck up there. So it's a widowmaker. If you start moving that tree base around, that tree's kind of like out towards this way, right? You can only follow it here because that guy's in the way, right? You don't want, you can follow it that way, but he's just going to get hung up with the branches. Very similar to what I was dealing with today. But the thing is, even though it's not a big tree, you can't assume that it's going to be an easy job, because like that tree could do one of these things when it's coming out, right? It could twist if you don't get your notch and all that stuff right, if you cut too fast. And that's what I was worried about, was that the top would make the tree spin a bit, because sometimes I've seen that happen. So it's like, that's why I'm telling you about it now. It would have been better if I would have been able to film it all and all that, but I can't film at clients' places yet and stuff like that. But yeah, all I can tell you is that with the cutting I did, I'm just going to touch up this chain just a little bit more so he's ready for the next job. I'm sorry, I keep dulling you. It's not your fault. It's not your fault, buddy. This chain, I had it almost perfect, but I didn't hit any metal this time with it, but I did, I did definitely, but I took out like a stump that was, pretty much a pain in the ass all summer. And again, for another little old lady, I try to get the stumps because like little twigs, you don't want anybody falling and hurting themselves and stuff like that. So, but had I had Ninja Shark today, boy, that would have been, that tree would have been massacred pretty fast. You know what I mean? Like cutting them up. But these little guys, the amount of work they can do is quite impressive. Like you're thinking small saw, it's useless, you can't do nothing. Yeah, you're not gonna go clear cut a bush with it. But boy, for branches, small trees, and small trees up to the size of that pail there, like I've literally fell on a couple, 4 or 5 trees this big at the stump, so we'll just get the bar for size, and again, this thing throws out chips like freaking potato chips there. I got it. Again, one more sharpening is probably going to be just dandy if I don't dull it. But I'm following stuff that big, so so that that's a a 40-50 foot tree if it's about that big at the base. Probably pretty easy, right? So no problem. Birch being a hardwood, it's not the hardest of wood. An oak would be probably a challenge that size for this, but even then, it depends on the oak. Like there's some oak that you go through it like a hot knife through butter, and other oak it's like, okay, it's like trying to cut steel. Trees are trees, right? So that was my adventure today, and the reason why I'm sharing that with you is that when I go forward in the future with these saws, especially probably next month when things start to slow down, theoretically, who knows, maybe I'll get busier. I'm gonna show you, like the limitations of these saws, of what they can cut down and stuff like that and cut up, but also how much work you can do with a small saw, which, is a niche that a lot of people probably, like, I don't sit there trying to burn out the saw. You know what I mean? Like these saws, they work. Okay, yeah, I wasn't pushing on them. I wasn't hurting them, but I wasn't being nice to them either today. But, like, I mean, I cut, like, I know when the saw is going to bog, right? So I don't keep trying to, I don't go, like, I don't push on it or whatever. I let the bar do the work. You cut at whatever pace this thing can cut at, which is actually quite impressive on little stuff. This thing is fantastic for limbing. So that one, but this one has the slightly larger bar. I wish you could actually get a 36-inch bar on a little saw like this. Even like the tiniest, little, so that'd bring you out to about here. Well, it'd be double, so just about double. So it'd bring you out to about here anyway. But a little, like the lightest bar and whatever chain you'd have to modify, a modified chain to do it just for limbing, nothing else, just limbing, just so you don't have to bend so much, right? That'd be nice, but I don't know if that's doable. But if it was, it'd be dandy. So I'm going to sharpen these guys up again, get them ready for the next job. This one was ready for the job this morning. This one, I should have sharpened it before I left. And, I didn't cut anything until I was ready. And I knew this one was ready to go because I hadn't used it since I last sharpened it. But, I'll touch them up. I'll touch them up. And I think this sharpening is really going to be the dandy one for this one. This one, I just had it perfect. And then, of course, I dulled it the other day. So I use these saws like 2-3 times a week. So if I have a bigger saw, bigger jobs, right? So, then I'll be getting into stuff like that. And, that's a job and a half, that one. I mean, that one, you definitely want to plunge cut something like this if you could, but you need a big saw to, like that's almost 2.5 feet there. Like it's big. Bicycle for scale, like that's a big tree. And I'm sure I'm going to be coming up against that stuff. And, you can make the money off of that too. But just with these little guys, yeah, you can do really well with them. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed that video or a series of videos. I just wanted to share it because, it was one of those things where if the tree itself was not the big issue, it's just that where the tree was, like it was close to a home and stuff like that. And just the little extra things that I did, like tying it off, take your time. And I think, one big problem that this is a video onto itself, and maybe that'll be the next video, is that people rush too fast to cut stuff. Yeah, maybe I'll do that. Yeah, talk about that.